David Harris, thanks for coming into the studio at Coast Community News, and congratulations on the much waited for Warnervale announcement.
Well, I've got a smile on my face today. We've been, as I said today at the announcement, 2007 when I was first elected, we were looking at, we brought it in as state significant and got through some of the planning stuff. We had when I lost the election in 2011, Darren Webber, who took over as the member for Wyong, did a great job in getting funding for the major intersection there to make sure it was properly signalised. And jointly between his time and my time, we got an agreement between all the proponents to build a road through the centre of the development, which meant that it was in a position where it could take off. Landcom, the government land organisation, sold the land at the front of the development to a company called Landcorp, New South Wales, and they had developed stage 1 and 2 of the residential development. Today we were turning the sod for the work that has begun over the last couple of weeks on the first commercial retail part of the site. So it's not done yet. There's still the town park is under rehabilitation, so council's working on that. But when that's finished, that land will open up to a beautiful town park and more housing, and Woolworths are talking about asking for a rezoning to get a full retail offering down on Sparks Road. So that's what people up there have been waiting for, they've wanted. I live in that area. We all moved there with the promise of a town centre, me in the 1990s, and everybody since. So it is good news. There's still work to do, but the fact that they've actually got shovels or tractors or tractivators in the ground and they're doing the earthworks shows that there is financial commitment and that we are starting to finally move forward.
It's been a frustration for well over 20 years, as you mentioned. I mean, when I first came to the coast, it was talked about with much desire, and you pointed out there are many people have moved there on the understanding that this was going to go ahead. Have you felt a sigh of relief amongst the people who live in the area that they'll be serviced at last?
Well, I think there's finally optimism. I think they'll wait until they see the first buildings before they actually believe it. I talked today about that we're reaching the end of the dreaming and we're actually seeing concrete construction now. So I think that believability will grow and it will actually bring further investment into the area, greater confidence. Colliers and Darracon are part of the equation with Landcorp, New South Wales, and they've actually got the cash to do this, which is unusual in this very uncertain economic times. But they're fully committed and they want to build something that the community can be proud of. And that's one of the things I said when they spoke to me was, look, I won't accept you're just going to build something. It has to be something the community can be proud of and realise the dream that people have had. It will be different from the plans that were drawn up in 1975 during the Whitlam era. It will be different from the plans the way they were in even 2007, but the commercial and retail reality has changed. Things like the internet, the growing areas of Lake Haven, Westfield, and the fact that our current existing town centres like Wyong and Toukley are already struggling in terms of retail. So, you know, that's the commercial reality we live in. The development at Wadalba is going gangbusters. I was up at Lake Mumwara on the weekend, another Woolworths development. It's going gangbusters. So they understand the market, and I think we have to listen to them and understand that what they will do is because it will make money and that will create jobs, particularly for local people and hopefully for some people end their commute to Sydney.
Woolworths have been a major player or actor in this space for all those decades, and they seems to have gone hot and cold on various iterations of the whole thing. Are they committed to the new development?
They certainly are, and for the first time they've given me assurance that it's no longer reliant on the railway station being built there. So before they said, well, when the railway station plans go ahead and we know for certain that there will be a station, then we will then commit to the retail section. They're saying now that they can survive without the railway station, and the government's put that on the back burner anyway. So it could be 10 years or more before there's a new railway station. So I'm also calling for the government to upgrade the current Warnervale railway station, which is right next to the precinct 7A, which is about to have a whole lot of new residential development, plus council's education precinct.
So those railway station upgrades in the north have been long and contentious. However, we seem to have broken a past there. Some of them are being upgraded. So you're calling for more upgrades at the existing station?
Correct. So what we need is probably toilet facilities and also more car parking, because the current station survives because Warnies, the local business there, lets people park on their property. So and that's great of them, but the reality is that as that area grows, there will be greater pressure in terms of car parking. There's bus services, but they don't properly service the whole area yet. Hopefully that will improve. And what we've seen is lifts go in at YE, which now can better serve the northern part of the Central Coast, so Lake Marmora, Mannering Park, Gwandalin. People can more quickly get across to YE. So probably the case for a massive Warnervale railway station probably isn't as strong. Transport for New South Wales, and I've had lots of arguments with them about this, but they say that if they're running express trains from the coast to Sydney, you can't keep putting more stations in. So there is some truth for that, but we need the car parking at both Tuggerah and Wyong to be improved, and that's part of the Wyong Town Centre project, and we've got a commitment at Tuggerah, plus what's happening at YE. But Warnervale still serves a really strong purpose, particularly for retail people. So out of peak hour, getting from that big Warnervale area to Westfield for work, for example, or getting to Newcastle for work for retail. So it still serves an important purpose. It needs to be there, but maybe isn't the big commuter need that it was before.
We had Adam Crouch in the studio last week and asked him about there seems to be a lot of infrastructure investment announcements in roads and sewer and of course the new school that's been built in that area. You must be pleased about that.
Well, as a local member who's not in government, yes. I'm really pleased that the lobbying that I've been doing is paying off. I mean, it's a growth area. So it doesn't matter whether you're Labor or Liberal, you understand that you need a bigger hospital. Yeah. You need wider roads, you need more traffic lights being put in, you need new schools, you need those railway station upgrades. So it's important for politicians, whatever their flavour, to be working together, and I meet regularly. So on Warnervale Town Centre, I've spoken to Rob Stokes, the Planning Minister, and explained the situation and what the community's saying about that area, and he's listened and got back to me, and that he understands where I'm coming from. So, you know, politicians often fight, that the media love us having a bit of a stoush, but behind the scenes it's more important for our communities that we work together, and the government's got the money at the moment, and so I'm talking to the government, and hopefully we're starting to see the infrastructure. We can throw in 2 new ambulance stations that have just been completed, and also, and fingers crossed, now the M1's complete, there will be more funding for the road through Wyong, the Pacific Highway upgrade. There's currently $9 million, so they've bought the land, they've started some of the demolition works and some of the pre-works, but we need that next big bucket of cash to actually get the funding going. And you know, at some stage we'll see the Pacific Highway go from Tuggerah all the way to Sparks Road via the Link Road, you know, and hopefully in our lifetimes, but we are starting to see progress.
Well, I was going to ask about that. Wyong is the chestnut to be cracked. Each time all of us drive through there, we wonder about the road and why on earth it hasn't been sorted. Why is it that Wyong hasn't been invested in that instance?
Yeah, so it's basically it's a complex project because there's heritage buildings and things through the town, and you've got the railway line right there. So whatever you do, you have to shift existing infrastructure. Previously that was a problem because RMS and Transport for New South Wales, as it's now known, were separate, and so negotiation between them was often difficult because they both had competing needs. Under the changes, they're both now inside the same department. There's one person in charge, and they're able to bring all the parties together, including council, and actually negotiate some of these things through so that we actually get an outcome. So that's a good thing that's happened. The other big problem was, and the RMS told me this in the early days, that they were never going to do it while the M1 was being upgraded, because if there was an issue on the M1, they have to divert traffic through Wyong, and they couldn't have roadworks underway on both roads at the same time. And that's hard. And Taylor Martin, I had coffee with him on last Monday, and he assures me now that that impediment's out of the road. That's open, and that hopefully now the budget's been put back till later in the year because of COVID, and hopefully we'll see some news there. But there is still some issues in terms of the railway line, because we've had the freight bypasses, and so that's been sort of on the eastern side of the station, the western side of the station. So hopefully they'll get that worked out. Then they can work out where they can put the busing to change, and then the rest of the project hopefully then will fall into place.
Well, thank you for coming in and discussing all of these issues. I mean, I know that our readers and viewers in the north want to hear what you're talking about. Just before you go though, with council, we view a stoush often between the state government and council. However, there seems to have been some success in the new planning, online planning portal that the ministers have praised council for that. Do you think you'll see some more cooperation, proactive cooperation between council and state government in your position, in between the two of them?
Well, it's absolutely vital. It has to happen, because they play such parallel roles, both in terms of council in providing basic infrastructure. So council also owns water and sewerage, and those new areas can't go ahead without that infrastructure. But they can't do it alone. They need support from both the state and the federal government. And so they've got to have their hand up for whatever funding's out there to fast track those sorts of important infrastructure so that the rest can happen. We've got lots of private developers who are very interested in the area. They see great potential. Next week I'm at the turning of the sod for the new ING building at North Wyong,
yes,
which will provide a lot of local jobs, moving from the Tuggerah Business Park and doubling in size. So people understand that northern part of the Central Coast, there's opportunities, and they need the state and the federal, the state and council working really closely together so that it's an easy playing field, because the more roadblocks they hit, the more expensive it gets, and so things either slow down or the people walk away, and we can't afford that.
I'll ask you the tough one is these local planning panels have come in and effectively taken away some of council's powers and so on, with Donna Reigart, who's the chair. How do you think that's going to evolve?
Well, I have to be optimistic about them. I know they operate in other parts of the state. I've been talking to mayors and councillors who operate with local planning panels, and they tell me that they're able to concentrate on the strategic planning. So getting those high level plans right so that planning's better for everyone, because people know the rules. What we often find is there's a bit of parochialism in council because they've been elected in their ward and whatnot, but at the end of the day, any development that fits the law, if council knocks it back, it goes to the Land Environment Court and gets through anyway, and it costs ratepayers legal costs. So if councillors get the overarching plans right about how our suburbs should look, where infrastructure should be, then developers can then work within that plan to deliver what's needed. We get the odd one where they want to go a bit above, I think, and one would hope that the planning panels would be sensitive to those community needs, because we don't put those things in place, those restrictions, just because we don't want stuff. I think it's because we want to keep our suburbs livable. We don't want them overdeveloped. People understand that people will move to the area. Most people here have moved to the area. I was born here, so I've seen the growth. And we want to do it in a sensible way. And hopefully the planning panel will work to do that. and it may take some time for people to get used to, but you know, the government's mandated it, so we have to work with it. You know, we as state Labor, we've got a problem that the government has cost shifted the cost of that panel onto ratepayers because that's a state instrument. We think the state should be paying for that, not ratepayers. So we've got some differences about how they're constituted, how people are selected to be on them, and all that sort of thing. But the councils that have them have said that it's, in a way, it's a freeing up of them, because most councillors aren't planners. They're not planning law experts, and you know, we all like what we like. And so sometimes you actually need people who are experts in that area to make those sorts of decisions. That only works if those high-level strategic plans are right. If they're not right, then everything underneath won't work either.
Well, I've got you there. The amalgamation, which is sort of happened now to a large extent. The council seems to be struggling a little bit financially, gets a little bit of stick for its deficits that it's been running. What's the basis of that? Is the basis of it that the efficiencies that were foreseen by the state government at the time haven't eventuated, or is it something else?
Yeah, well, I often fear that Central Coast Council was an afterthought. It wasn't one of the original targets for mergers. In fact, the state government's original plan was to reduce the number of councils in Sydney. An opportunity came up and they had a look at the Central Coast and said, oh, well, there's the two councils, they've both got their issues, maybe if we join them together, it'll fix everything. I was very dubious about that. I opposed it because the Central Coast is such a big, diverse place. It's geographically diverse, from the valleys to the beaches, from north to south. There's a whole range of issues that aren't the same across the whole area. But the other big problem is that that area involves huge amounts of infrastructure, some of it quite ageing in the south, but new infrastructure required in the north. And so you get that struggle between fixing what needs to be fixed and building what needs to be built. And the council really hasn't come to terms with that because it doesn't have the resources to do it. So they're having to make decisions. The state government has their priorities and they've tried to force those on council as well. There's some grants that have been given, which is great, but then there's been conditions put on those grants, and we've seen that with the art library facility, where originally it was foretold that it was going to be on the waterfront, and then that land got taken up for other reasons, and now the council's getting criticised, but they haven't got anywhere to put it. So so it has created problems, and I think the ward structure is problematic because, as I said, people are parochial about their area. They're all fighting for those resources. You've got quite diverse areas, and as a person from the north, technically there's more councillors from the south if you look at the boundary. So we always have a bit of a whinge up in the north. But the real problem is that you mentioned the efficiencies haven't happened. So it was envisaged that as the councils joined together, they would be able to merge services. That would mean they wouldn't need the same number of staff, and they could get efficiencies out of IT and a whole range of areas. What we've seen is the opposite. So staff has actually grown, and those efficiencies haven't been realised. My argument at the time was you could have had two separate councils that had merged IT, had a waste contract that went across the whole Central Coast. We already have water and sewerage. So those things, that's what they've done in Newcastle, with the Newcastle group up there. So we could have got those efficiencies and kept the council separate, but now we've picked up all these other issues. And people blame the councillors, and some of them don't get along all that well, but when you're trying to balance a budget that has so many competing interests, and a huge community expectation. I mean, local government has probably, out of all the levels of government, the highest expectations on them. It's very hard to meet, and no one's ever happy with council.
Well, this strikes me. There's very little said positive about council. However, it does an enormous amount, particularly I think on the Central Coast. Council is Northern Sydney or even Western Sydney don't get as much flack because a lot of the services are established.
Correct.
What are the big things, do you think, that could happen, should happen on the coast? You know, the big things, if you had a fully functioning council would partner with everybody.
Yeah, so I've said for a long time that council should focus on its core business. So at the moment, council's trying to do everything. So they want to be the planners, they want to run all the facilities, and they also want to be the developer. So they want to build things. You can't efficiently do everything. So if you concentrate on getting land to the market and providing services to people, the basic services, I think most people would be happy with that. They want their parks mowed, they want their curb and guttering, they want the roads fixed, those sorts of things. But when you're trying to build airports and education precincts and art houses and all that, and run stadiums and all this sort of thing, then it is really hard to do. And I don't think, or what I think happens is they don't do any of it well. And so they get more criticism. We've got a great stadium here in Gosford that council could get revenue from if it leased it out and let someone who runs stadiums run the stadium. The same with our pools and other infrastructure. It doesn't mean privatising them. What it means is that they become revenue sources for council instead of running at losses. So I think council has to have a really strong think about its focus, where it's going to get money from, because at the moment they're struggling with covering things with rates. They get developer contributions, but that's not enough to do the work that's needed. And then there's government grants. That's their 3 areas of income, and they have to be a little bit more sensible about how they source money. And I think then council could be more efficient, but at the moment they're sort of torn in so many different directions. I mean, I'd hate to be a councillor. The business paper's this thick every week, and they don't get through half the stuff because it's too complex.
All right, well, no doubt we'll be talking a lot more about that in the next year because we have a delayed council election, so we have another year to enjoy all of this. Yeah. And I hope to see you back here in the studio. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for the invite.